He could not sleep with the light off, and he did not know why. That was the first thing he told me, sitting across from me with his hands folded too tightly. A man in his mid-40s who had been a practicing Catholic his whole life. He went to Mass, he believed, and for 4 months he had been sleeping with every lamp in the house burning until dawn. He thought the problem was stress. He thought it was his work, his marriage, the ordinary weight of a life. He was wrong about all of it. The problem was hanging on the wall above his pillow, and it had been there since the spring, and he had hung it himself with a small brass hook in his own 2 hands, and he had thought it was beautiful. He told me he had begun to feel watched in the dark. Not afraid exactly, watched, as though something patient were sitting up while he lay down. I asked him one question before he could go further. I asked him what was on the wall over his bed. He went quiet. And in that silence I already knew most of what was coming, because I have heard this account in its essential shape more times than I can number. My name is Chad Ripper. I am a Catholic priest. I hold doctorates in philosophy and in theology, and I was trained formally and under obedience in the ministry of exorcism. I did not seek that work. No sane man seeks it. I was assigned to it the way a soldier is assigned to clear a minefield. And I have spent decades now in the confessional, at the bedsides of the dying, and in rooms where the ordinary rules of the world had plainly been suspended. I am a Thomist by training, which means I distrust drama and I distrust feeling, and I want the cause of a thing before I will say anything about it. So understand that when I tell you a story like this one, I am not telling it to frighten you. I am telling it because the cause is teachable, and because the cause is more common than you want it to be. Now back to the man, and to the wall over his bed. The object was a mask. He had bought it on a trip some years before in a place he described to me carefully, a market near a site where the local peoples still made offerings to spirits they named and fed and feared. It was carved of dark wood, a face longer than a human face, with eyes that had been hollowed all the way through so that the wall showed behind them, and a mouth set in something that was not quite a smile. The man told me the seller had said it was old. He told me the seller had said it had been used. He had not asked used for what. He had liked the weight of it in his hands. He had liked the way it looked over the headboard, the way it caught the lamplight, the way visitors stopped and stared at it. For the first 2 years it had simply hung there and nothing had happened. And that is the part people never expect. That these things are patient, that they do not announce themselves the first night. Then his prayer life had thinned, the way prayer thins in all of us when we are not watching it. And his confession had lapsed, and the holy water font by his door had gone dry, and he had not refilled it. And somewhere in that thinning, the thing over his bed found room. He described the smell first. He said the bedroom had begun to carry an odor he could not place and could not clean away. A smell like wet ash, like something that had burned and then been rained on. Faint in the day and stronger at night. He had washed the linens, he had opened the windows, but the smell stayed. For 400 years, the Church provided the laity with specific prayers to address situations in their homes that they could not explain. Most parishes stopped teaching them after 1965. Now they have all been compiled into a concise, practical guide. Keep it near the door and read the first page tonight. You will find the link to get the book in the description and in the first pinned comment. Then came the cold. Not the cold of a draft, which moves, but a cold that settled over one side of the bed and stayed there, his side, the side under the mask. So that he had begun, without deciding to, sleeping closer to the wall, away from it. His wife asking him why he crowded her. He could not tell her why. Then came the sounds. A low sound, he said, almost below hearing, that he felt in his chest more than his ears. And it came in the deep part of the night, the hours after 2, the hours when the body is heaviest and the mind has let go of its guard. He would surface from sleep with his heart going hard, and the certainty, total and unreasoning, that the eyes hollowed through the wood were turned toward him. He knew this was impossible. He told himself it was impossible. Every single night, he turned the lamp back on. I want to stop the story here because this is the place where I must give you what the tradition actually says, or the rest of it will sound like a ghost tale. And it is not a ghost tale. St. Thomas Aquinas treats the angels at length in the first part of his Summa, across the questions running roughly from the 50th to the 64th. And what he establishes there is the thing most people have never been taught. A fallen angel is still an angel. The fall corrupted its will, turned it wholly and finely against God, but it did not lessen the angel's nature, did not dull its intelligence, did not shorten its memory. The intellect that the demon possesses is greater than yours and greater than mine, and it does not forget, and it does not tire, and it has in some cases a very long time to study what it works on. That is the part the modern mind cannot hold. We imagine, if we imagine anything, a crude force, a banging in the attic. The reality is an intelligence cold and exact that knows the difference between a man at his strongest and a man at his weakest, and waits. And where is a man at his weakest? Not at the altar, not at noon with his work in front of him. He is at his weakest asleep, when the will is set aside and the reason is dark and only the imagination is still moving, throwing up its images in the dark with no one minding the door. The fathers understood the imagination as a real faculty, a kind of inner chamber where images are kept and combined. And they understood that this chamber does not close when we sleep. It opens. Scripture is not vague about who walks in those hours. St. Peter writes it plainly in his first letter, the 5th chapter, the 8th verse. The adversary goes about as a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. A lion does not hunt the herd at its strongest. It hunts at the edge of the night, at the straggler, at the one who has wandered from the others. An object that draws the imagination toward the wrong thing, hung in the one place where you spend your most defenseless hours, is not a decoration. It is an invitation left on the table all night long. Now, I must say what kind of object this was in the Church's own categories, because not everything strange is the same thing. The Church distinguishes soberly between obsession, which is an attack from without on the senses, and possession, which is the far rarer seizing of the body itself. St. Thomas Aquinas wrote more than a dozen questions on how fallen angels operate. Most Catholics have never read one line of it. This archive gathers that teaching, the 1,614 cases and 4 centuries of documented cases, into a single reference. Read it slowly, 1 chapter a night. You will find the link to get the book in the description and in the first posted comment. What this man was suffering was obsession, and it had a foothold, and the foothold was the mask, an object that was made for the worship of something other than God, handled and used in that worship, carries the orientation it was made for. It is, if you like, a flag planted on ground, and the flag says, "This ground was given over." To hang it in your home is to leave the flag standing. To hang it over the bed is to leave it standing in the breach. The old exorcists understood this with a precision we have largely lost. The Ritual Romanum, the Roman ritual promulgated in 1614 and used in essentially that form for more than 3 centuries, treats the removal and destruction of such objects as a matter of course, an early and obvious step, not an afterthought. The Revised Rite, issued in 1999, is a more careful, more guarded document, and we will come to what that guardedness has cost. But the older books simply assume what every parish priest once knew, that things carry, and the first thing you do is take down what does not belong. The saints lived this. The curé of Ars, John Vianney, a parish priest in a small French village in the 1800s, was tormented at night for years by a presence he came to call, almost wearily, le grappin, the grappling hook, which threw his furniture about and once set his bed alight. He was not a fanciful man. He was a hard-working country priest who heard confessions 16 hours a day, and he treated these nightly assaults as a known feature of the work and went on. Padre Pio, the Capuchin friar, bore the wounds of Christ in his hands and feet and sides from the 20th of September 1918 until near his death 50 years later. And he wrote in his letters of beatings in the night, of being left bruised by morning. These were not weak or hysterical men. They were among the strongest souls the church has produced. And the attacks came when they came in the dark, in the bedroom, at the hour of least defense. If the enemy spends its patience on saints in their sleep, you should not be surprised that it will spend a little on you through a thing you hung up yourself and forgot to question. So we come to the night it mattered, which is the part I promised you at the beginning. The man had reached the end of what he could carry alone, and a priest he trusted had sent him to me. And I told him the same thing I'm telling you. I told him the mask had to come down that night before he slept again and be destroyed. Not stored, not sold, not given away to pass the trouble to another house, but broken and burned. He resisted. People always resist this part, and the resistance itself is worth noticing. He told me it was valuable. He told me it was only art. He told me he felt foolish. And then he told me the thing that ended his own argument. He said that when he had taken it off the wall the week before to paint behind it, he had set it face down on the bed for an hour, and that for that 1 hour, the only hour in 4 months, the room had been warm and the smell had been gone, and he had napped in the afternoon light with no fear at all. He had hung it back up because the wall looked bare. He heard himself say it and stopped. He took it down that night. He has told me since what it was like, that his hands did not want to do it, that he had to make himself, that the brass hook came out of the wall with the plaster and left a small dark hole he later could not look at. He wrapped it and he broke it and he burned the pieces, and a priest blessed the room, and he hung in its place a crucifix that had been properly blessed, and beside it a small image of Our Lady, and he refilled the dry font by the door with holy water. I am not telling you the wood was alive. Wood is wood. What I am telling you is that an object given over to the worship of something other than God can be a real foothold for a real intelligence, and that footholds can be removed by the authority Christ left to his church, and that when this one was removed, the obsession stopped, the cold left, the smell left, the man sleeps now in the dark. What you make of that is your decision before God, but I have watched it too many times to call it nothing. Let me tell you what that case proved, because it proves something that applies to every house, including yours. It proves that the war is not won by strength of feeling or by force of will, but by the ordinary, unglamorous means Christ actually left us, and those means work. The Eucharist is the first of them and the greatest. The God who made the angels, fallen and unfallen, gives himself to you under the appearance of bread. And there is nothing in the created order, no intelligence, however ancient, that can stand as his equal. To receive him worthily and often is not a sentiment. It is the strongest thing a human being can do. Confession is the second, and here I must be exact, because the modern ear has gone soft on this. When our Lord breathed on the apostles after the resurrection and said in the 20th chapter of John that whose sins they forgave were forgiven, and whose they retained were retained, he was not speaking poetry. He was handing over a real power exercised through real men. And the absolution spoken over you in the confessional genuinely empties the ground the enemy stands on. Because the enemy's purchase on a soul is sin. And where the sin is gone, the purchase is gone with it. Then the sacramentals, which are the church's gifts for exactly the kind of trouble this man had. Holy water, blessed by a priest, is not a folk charm. It is the church's prayer made material, and the old exorcist used it constantly and deliberately. A crucifix that has been blessed, hung where this man's mask had hung, is not the same object as a decorative cross from a shop shelf. And the difference is the blessing, which sets the thing apart for God and draws on the church's authority every hour it hangs there. An image of Our Lady in the bedroom is no soft piety. The tradition has always held that the demonic recoils from her, the lowly handmaid through whom the head of the serpent was crushed. And there is a reason the rosary terrifies what hates God. The rosary is the gospel turned in the hands like beads through water. The great mysteries of our redemption walk through 1 decade at a time. And a family that prays it together at night does more to guard the house than any lock. None of this is exotic. All of it was in your grandmother's reach. The tragedy is how much of it has been let go. And that is the question I cannot avoid. The question of why this is happening now, to people like this man, people who were baptized and married in the church, and yet stood completely undefended in their own bedrooms. It is happening because the things that used to defend them were quietly taken away, not by the enemy from outside, but by neglect from within. After the Second Vatican Council, which sat from 1962 to 1965, a great deal of good was intended, and a great deal of catechesis collapsed in the carrying out of it. A whole generation was raised without being taught the plain content of the faith, taught feelings about God instead of the truths about God, and you cannot defend what you were never told you possessed. The surveys of recent years are not a small thing. When a large share of Catholics in this country will tell a pollster that the Eucharist is only a symbol, you are not looking at a difference of opinion. You are looking at a disarmament. A people who do not know what the host is will not defend themselves with it. The home blessing went the same way. The old practice of having the priest come and bless the house room by room, so that the place where a family lived and slept was claimed for Christ and known to be claimed, most Catholics under 60 have never seen it done. The holy water fonts emptied at the doors of homes and were not refilled. Confession, which my grandparents' generation made weekly and without drama, collapsed to once a year or never. So that the single most effective weapon against the enemy's foothold sits unused in nearly every parish on a Saturday afternoon. And the revised rite of 1999, careful as it is and rightly cautious against credulity, raised the practical barriers to formal exorcism so high that a soul in genuine trouble can wait a very long time for help that the older church would have given more readily. I am not attacking the church. The church is my mother, and I will defend her with my life. I am telling you that her storehouse of protection was left open and was looted by our own forgetting. I am not telling you the demonic is behind every dry font and every unblessed home. What I am telling you is that an undefended people will sooner or later find out what they were being defended from. What you do with that warning is your decision before God. So here is what to do, and I mean this week, not someday. Tonight, before you sleep, look at what is over your bed and over the beds of your children. And if there is anything there that was made for the worship of something other than God, anything brought home from a pagan place, anything occult or ambiguous in its meaning, take it down. Do not store it. Do not sell it and pass it on. Break it and have it disposed of. And if it troubles you to do so, that hesitation is information. And the answer to it is still, take it down. This week, go to confession, an honest and complete confession, and clear the ground. Receive the Eucharist worthily in a state of grace, and keep receiving it. Ask a priest to bless your home, and if that cannot be arranged quickly, obtain holy water that a priest has blessed, and use it on the door frames in the bedrooms yourself, which a layman may rightly do. Hang in the place where the wrong thing hung, a crucifix that has been blessed, and an image of Our Lady near it. Consecrate your family to the Sacred Heart of Jesus and to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, in plain words, out loud, as a household. Pray the Rosary every day together if you can. And if any of what this man suffered is happening under your own roof, find a priest who takes these matters seriously and will direct you, a sound spiritual director. And do not try to fight alone what the Church gives you company and authority to fight. I will not end this with optimism, because optimism is a feeling, and feelings are not what carries you through the dark hours. I will end it with hope, which is a different thing, a theological thing, the settled certainty that God keeps His promises even when the evidence in front of you says otherwise. The Church has been here before, far worse than now. In the 4th century, the Arian heresy spread so far that the great Saint Athanasius stood very nearly alone against the world. Athanasius contra mundum. And the faith was kept by a remnant who would not bend, and the faith survived. It survived the guillotines and the desecrated altars of the French Revolution. It survived the long, cold decades of communism that swore to bury it. It survived all of it the same way, through saints, through ordinary people who chose the sacraments and the cross when it would have been easier to choose nothing. You are asked to be one of those people in your own house, over your own bed, tonight. Choose Christ. Choose His church. Choose His sacraments. Choose His mother. Choose the cross. And do not look back. The next time we speak, I will tell you about the threshold of a home, the doorway itself, and what the old rite knew about who has the right to cross it, and what happens to a house whose door was open to the wrong guest and never closed again.